New York, 1874. Thomas Edison has just built something worth $10 million. He knows it, Western Union knows it, but they can't make a deal. Thomas Edison will not patent it, and Western Union will not buy it until a patent is granted, and so they are stuck. And then from nowhere, a man walks in and sticks $30,000 on the table. In 5 years, he turns that $30,000 into $5 million. His name is Jay Gould. And what he does next makes modern insider trading look a little bit like shoplifting. Throughout that year, Thomas Edison in his Newark workshop continued to look for improvements to the telegraph system. Its biggest issue, of course, stemmed from its greatest strength. The telegraph took off because a single line carried a simple code of dots and dashes. As Western Union onboarded more customers, however, more and more messages needed sending, and that meant more lines were needed. The lines were copper was expensive. Edison started to think about two different technologies. The duplex sent two signals down the same line in the same direction. The diplex, on the other hand, allowed for simultaneous bidirectional communication. Two grains of sand were now in the kaleidoscope of Thomas Edison's mind. When that kaleidoscope turned, they combined into something else entirely. This became the genesis of the quadruplex telegraph. William Orton valued the quadruplex highly for obvious reasons. $10 million was the number he put on it. He realised with the quadruplex he'd be able to scale the telegraph system without scaling any of its machinery. But then William Orton made a terrible mistake. Thomas Edison did not want to patent the quadruplex. Once it was patented, true, the inventor could exploit it exclusively, but it'd be in the public domain. Once in the public domain, other inventors would be inspired to come up with competitive ideas. Edison wanted to avoid this. William Orton, on the other hand, did not want to pay for something that was not yet patented, because then he wouldn't be able to exploit it exclusively. There was a standoff, and this was the moment of Orton's terrible mistake. He did not back Thomas Edison. Then, out of nowhere, like a character from a Victorian novel, a shark-like man whose reputation precedes him by miles enters into the story. Jay Gould had just sold a yacht for $30,000. He approached Edison, and Edison said, "Make me an offer." Well, since he just sold the yacht for $30,000, he said to Edison, "All right, $30,000 for the rights to the quadruplex." Boom! A deal was done. That story, incidentally, is covered in depth in the other Thomas Edison episode. Follow the links below, but for now, let's crack on with Jay Gould, shall we? Gould knew what he was doing. He was the owner of the Atlantic and Pacific Telegraph Company, a competitor to Western Union. With the quadruplex, Jay Gould's company would be able to undercut Western Union on price because they'd be able to send more messages down that single wire. However, Jay Gould was also in charge of the New York Tribune, a newspaper. He let the story leak out. Western Union stocks plummeted. Of course, Jay Gould knew that would happen, and he'd already shorted Western Union stock in anticipation of the plunge. 5 years later, Western Union had to get their hands on the quadruplex if they were to survive. And so 5 years after buying the rights to the quadruplex, Western Union bought the whole of Pacific and Atlantic Telegraph from Jay Gould for a whopping $5 million. Gould had, in other words, managed to change that $30,000 investment into $5 million of pure profit, whatever he made from shorting Western Union stock and whatever he'd made through his Atlantic and Pacific Telegraph Company. The story of Jay Gould is really quite remarkable, shining a light on the visionaries and rebels and the machines that they all built. What big lessons should we take away from this? Well, the first one is that innovations are made of their constituent parts. The hardware of the telegraph grew from the battery. This is incremental change evolution. Samuel Morse, though, did something quite special. He married the new technology of electromagnetism to the ancient technology of language. Humans, we are seriously limited in how much we can say and hear at any single moment. We communicate roughly at 39 bits per second. That is not very quick. Therefore, We, humans, evolved this massive brain of ours which allows us to mentalize, to effectively intuit what a person is thinking and feeling. And that means with just a few choice words, we can bring forth terabytes of information in the recipient. Thus, the Telegraph, the thing that kicked all of this trouble off, is a child of electromagnetism and language. This explains why, despite the hardware being not much more sophisticated than a battery, the Telegraph shattered the world as humans knew it back then. From the Telegraph then, we get to Thomas Edison and that kaleidoscopic mind of his. He worked with the telegraph from a very young age, and he understood electromagnetism. Grains of sand therefore would go into that mind of his. The grains of sand that made up the quadruplex were already there. The Telegraph, the Diplex, the Duplex. It just required Thomas to turn that kaleidoscopic mind of his so the sand fell into a new and endearing pattern. Not unlike Thomas Edison, Jay Gould also had a little bit of a kaleidoscopic mind, but inside of his mind he had a few different things. He had a newspaper, he had a telegraph company, and in the quadruplex he had a new component. And so when he turned the kaleidoscope of his mind, the result for him was $5 million when he eventually sold Atlantic and Pacific only a few years later. What does all of this mean for today? Well, we are right now in the middle of a speculative bubble. Nobody really knows the valuations of companies like OpenAI and Anthropic. The question, though, on everybody's mind is this: who will be the big winners and who will be the big losers? And specifically, who right now are the Jay Goulds? Thanks for listening, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the story of Jay Gould. If you really want to know the full version and how it fits into the Thomas Edison story, follow the links which are down below or on the screen right now. Subscribe to the channel if you want more of this stuff in your inbox, and of course, ask me any questions you like in the comments because I love answering them. Until next time, goodbye.